Tinfoil hat. Oh, what the fuck are you guys even talking about?
Global controls will have to be imposed, and a world governing body will be created to enforce them.
Welcome to Tinfoil Hat. We go deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
Are you ready to get your mind blown?
Good morning, Swarm, and welcome to Tinfoil Hat. You know I am. You know I'm here to do. I'm here to
Rah!
joining me as always, Xavier Guerrero, and on the ones and twos, Jay Nice, Juicy Johnny, and Carl. Everybody. Yeah,
We figured out what Carl's up to this whole time. He's
Yeah,
making
we know.
memes.
Yes,
He's doing
He is
Russian disinformation.
collusion meme master. Everybody, meme magic Carl. That's what they call him back there.
That's why he's
That's how
busy, because they never stop making
Constantly.
disinfo.
Constantly.
They work while
Pushing
you're asleep.
disinformation. It is truly amazing. Hey guys, it's your boy Sweet Sammy T here. Go to see SamTripoli.com. Check out my dates. I want to jump off right out the gate and say, New Jersey, you never let me down. Fun times. Fun times. Well, guess what? More shows coming. Thousand Oaks, bang, buy a ticket. Please, somebody show up to my show. Thousand Oaks, Indianapolis. Then I'll be in St. Louis with Xavier Guerrero and my good friend Eddie Bravo. Then we'll be in I'm in Bellflower on November 10th, and we are in Austin and Dallas in November. More dates to come. Go to samtripoli.com. New t-shirts are up. I have some premium content coming for you. All that and more on samtripoli.com. So let's get into it. Joining us on his birthday, it was just his birthday. He has a fun, festive screen. He's going to tell us a little bit about us. You know him. He is the booker of Tinfoil Hat. He has a podcast called My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. It is his birthday, and he used that birthday as an excuse to be late. Please welcome Mark Steeves, everybody. How are you, Mark?
Great. Happy to be here. Happy to use my birthday as an excuse to be late and as an excuse to be a guest on the show, because got some interesting stuff that I want to introduce to you hardworking gentlemen. As the booker of the show, you know, I'm always throwing some wacky guests at you guys, and sometimes they come out of left field. So
we love it. We love it. We love you.
We could sort of set the stage for some future episodes to come. But yeah, happy to be here.
Glad you're here, Mark. Explain your screensaver to us. When it first came on, I thought you were very pro-Palestine. I was like, this guy loves Palestine.
It's just an OBS screen that I thought looked cool. Now I'm totally rethinking it, and you probably will never see it again.
Well, I'm gonna be
I
honest
liked
with
it.
you right now. No, it's
We
great,
did. If
but-
that's true, we did you a big favor. I can tell you that, buddy. There you go.
No. I think it's cool. It's definitely like, hey, dude, I got a fucking public access show from 1985. That's the vibe that I get right here. It's very
Yeah.
nice, and I like it.
Yeah. It's like
I
coming
like it a
up
lot.
later, Wayne's World.
This is how I usually appear on other people's shows, and now I'm starting to understand why I don't get a lot of invites back. So
No.
Good.
You're always
Why
welcome
not?
back, buddy. You're always welcome back.
I'm not going to use this moving forward. But
I mean, Xavier's is blurry. He's a blurry Mexican in this picture. It's fine. Nobody's perfect on this show. Nobody.
Exactly. Nobody's
Okay.
perfect.
Nobody's
really,
perfect.
No rhyme or reason. I just thought it looked cool. But yeah, that's out the window now. But anyways, we're going to be talking about Atlantis.
It looks great. It's your birthday. You can
Look-
look however you want.
Oh yeah, his
tomorrow,
birthday. You're right.
tomorrow we're gonna light you up. But today it looks great, buddy. It looks.
Now you're
great.
revealing why.
Congratulations, your mom.
Yeah, this is why I want to be on the show on my birthday, because I know Sam will take it a little easier on me. But
I take it easy on you all the time. You guys don't understand the fights that happen in the text thread where I have to keep these two guys from going at it. But we'll get into that a little later. So, what do you want to talk about, Mark? First of all, Mark, for those who may not be familiar with you, which I find impossible, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where our guests can find you?
Mhm. Yeah, so I have the podcast, as you pointed out. My family thinks I'm crazy, which was sort of put together around the same time I started working with Sam as a booker. So, yeah, I interview all sorts of crazy people. Some of them make their way to this show, some of them don't. And yeah, I've got tons of content available, whether you're on Rockfin or YouTube or really any audio platform. I just put out an episode today talking about UAPs. No comment on that subject, but yeah, there's my website. Probably also looks like a public access website.
Okay.
But,
That was a joke. We're having fun. You put together also a network. How's that network going?
Good, slowly growing, surely, strongly. And we got some new podcasts that just joined in. I got to make the pages for them very soon. But yeah, it's a free podcast cooperative, essentially a directory of conspiracy and strange podcasts.
How many are you up to?
We have over 100 now. And Apple, Spotify, they're never going to have a genre there in the podcast section that says conspiracy or cryptid or whatever. So altmediaunited.com is a great place if you're into that kind of stuff to just go and check out a bunch of great podcasts like this one. Sam's shows are all listed on there, and the Union of the Unwanted, and everybody who's a part of the Union of the Unwanted as well, for the most part. So yeah,
I love it.
United.
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's great. You're doing great work, buddy. You're doing the Lord's work. So what do you want to get into, dude? It's your birthday.
So there's a few things that we're going to talk about today. And if you guys read the notes, which I'm guessing you didn't, you might have seen that. You did.
We did.
We did
So
moments
did.
before you,
We
while we
did.
were waiting for you to get here. Actually, we read the
Okay.
notes.
So any of that stood out to you? Maybe the last paragraph.
Edgar
Well, here's
Casey,
the thing,
I'm a big
Mark.
fan.
Here's the thing. The audience has not read the notes, so we
Okay,
like to
so
we almost like to present it like we're just having a conversation.
Well, I want to give my thesis, and we'll get into it. So
Okay, let's do
basically, Atlantis is a real ancient civilization that once existed. There are remnants of it around the world, and there are a number of cultures that record events from these Atlantean times. And there's also people in modern times who have presented revelations, let's call it, about Atlantis that have proven to be true, whether through scientific or archaeological, work to prove such things. But some of the stories are too crazy to be proven, but worth talking about. Things like Atlantean sex hybrid factories, where they were creating basically all sorts of combinations of animal and human hybrids, and then using them as slaves of all sorts of varieties. We have these really strange accounts of people channeling past lives as Atlanteans where they had sex with dinosaurs. So yeah, we're gonna get into.
I'm in. I got it. This is
Cool.
my jam.
That's
I
all I
love
wanted
it.
to do.
Anytime we can get into dinosaur sex, I'm like, we need to make this episode happen. It's very interesting. There's a lot of discussion about Atlantis and what it represents. What do you think is the biggest impact on why Atlantis is so important? Let's just say one day it just the holy grail of evidence comes out and we can pinpoint not only where Atlantis was, when it was. What do you think impact that would have?
Well, I think science is kind of making their way to this conclusion, but at a certain point in history, the big, impact that Atlantis carried with it was the idea that humanity isn't, only a couple thousand years old. For a long portion of time, we were given this idea that, the Earth is only a couple thousand years old, and even still today, people argue from a very fundamentalist biblical perspective that is the case. And I would argue that the Bible, in fact, was talking about something altogether different. I know how you feel.
What
about
is that?
time and all
What do
that.
you say? I know I'm open-minded to hearing this because it is a big discussion.
We're gonna get to that today.
Okay. All right.
But basically what I'm proposing is that, Atlantis is this actual civilization that fills in the gap that we have in archaeology. So, archaeologists, academia today, they have this big gap between when civilization came about and when humans came about. There's just this time frame there where, oh yeah, we were just hunter gatherer, dimwit Neanderthal types, so living in caves and doing that kind of thing. Most of the leading researchers in this realm of alternative history agree that that is bogus. I mean, you guys have had plenty of people on the show to talk about all the ancient sites that push the calendar back further and further, push the timeline back further and further. Globeki Tepe is an example of one of the oldest sites that we've found. And funny enough, before a lot of these, scientific discoveries were made, people like Edgar Sayce were prophetically giving information that pointed to this. And given that he was illiterate, and we'll get into all of the other interesting aspects about Edgar Sayce in a bit, but given the fact that Edgar never read any of this stuff during his lifetime, it's completely stupefying to think that not only did he predict and espouse information that at that time wasn't verified, now is. Not only did he make those, we can call them predictions, I prefer to call them revelations, because Edgar Sayce believed in God, he believed in Christ. And part of my theory is that Jesus is of course a prophet. I'm not here to tell anybody their beliefs are wrong, but I think that there's a continuation of prophecy that goes beyond Jesus. Obviously, there's a whole conversation about the angel Gabriel and Muhammad and that. I'm not here to talk about that, but when it comes to America, there's this whole side of American history that's been left out. You guys talked to Avery Warner a couple episodes ago, and she mentioned Joseph Smith and how he cooked up this whole thing with the golden tablets. Well, one thing that she left out, I don't think she left it out on purpose, it just wasn't important to her thesis, but the mounds are where Joseph Smith got these golden tablets from. And I think that is really important. And we'll get to why that's really important and why I think that these Nephilim dark forces that we've talked so much about on the show as of late are actually this fallen group of Atlanteans who messed around with incredibly dark arts and are still somehow disincarnate on the planet, trying to manipulate events, and maybe even are responsible for these major powers coming to America and creating this empire here. So, and possibly that's also why they don't want to acknowledge Atlantis as a real place, because it would lead people back to these dark forces that are controlling humanity to this day. So
super interesting. Super interesting. So your thoughts are that maybe these entities aren't fallen angels, that maybe they're just Atlanteans. Is that your theory?
No. I think fallen angel and Atlantean could very well just be the two different descriptions of the same being. I'm not discounting one or the other. I think, it's just a matter of perspective, right? So we have different cultures talking about what seems like the same events, right? We've established that the flood was recorded by all these different cultures. Even geologists have found evidence that the flood, washed across the Midwest, and there's this huge, flat piece of the layer of geology where you can see a flood actually happen. So, that kind of idea has been established pretty thoroughly. But no, I think that, yeah, whatever these beings were, they're probably humans in the past that did very evil things, and it caused God to punish them and destroy their cities and flood the earth, as we're told in the Bible, right? So, and maybe that's how we remember it now. Maybe it's a little bit more nuanced and a little more complicated than that. Maybe it's God philosophically did this to them and not actually did this to them. Maybe it's like what we see in Star Wars, where we learn morals like evil ultimately corrupts people, and that corruption can't sustain itself, right? So I think that's more or less what we see with Atlantis. But let's get to my little presentation here, and I'll show you guys exactly how this all started.
I'm in, dude. Let's go.
Cool. All right, so let me just hit slideshow, and then I'll share my screen. And you guys let me know when you can see that.
There it is.
Perfect.
All right. So, what you guys are looking at right here is a very interesting stone that I personally found. My girlfriend was with me as well. If I don't say that, she'll literally kill me. um, but we found this birdstone in Connecticut, of all places. And my whole life, like I've learned about Atlantis and all these weird civilizations, but I never thought like my home state had anything to do with it, right? And I still am not 100% sure that this is Atlantean, but you'll see why I'm bringing this up later on. Essentially, we stumbled upon a giant stone that, I mean, you be the judge of what it's shaped like. It's clearly shaped really odd. It almost looks like it has a finger coming off one end of it. And I started calling it a bird stone because it looks like a bird.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. What's your girlfriend's name again?
Tara.
Tara.
Shout out to Tara.
Shout out to Tara. Yes, this is definitely
So we found this
looking. If
we
you
found
describe it
this-
to the listeners who are listening that don't see the video.
Yes. So this picture is of a massive stone. I could actually stand on top of it. It's about 6 feet wide and a couple feet, maybe 2 or 3 feet tall, and it's sitting on top of another boulder in this sort of clearing of overgrown weeds. So we found this next to a standing stone, which is just a very tall stone propped up in the ground. And this site happens to be in alignment with this line of ancient stone structures that an author named Glenn Kreisberg wrote about. And his theory is that these stone markers were some sort of ancient path that led to these very, very old copper mines that are now in the Great Lakes area in the United States. I think it's called the Kinesiwa Peninsula in Michigan, where they found over 5,000 mines. So these stone structures are kind of like, I don't know, pointing the way there. And it just happens to intersect with my state. And that is something you can see here on this little map. It goes all the way up to Michigan there and Wisconsin. And yeah, it's very, very strange that, all of this stuff, for the most part, is written about by authors who get published, by spiritual publishing companies. Like, this isn't like academic stuff. This is relegated to the fringes of history and that sort of research. But lo and behold, synchronicity had it that we found this stone, and I had never seen it, talked about in any books. So I began looking into this subject and found all these other stone structures that are accounted for, but still, like, people for the most part don't really know who built them. And the Native Americans themselves are like, yeah, we didn't build all of these. They did work with some stone, but for the most part, they have legends of giants building them. So
Mark, you have to name that thing so it becomes official, like the Mark Steeves Summit
Steeves
or
Birdstone.
the Mark Steeves Birdstone.
I would be a little more humble than that, and maybe let somebody who lives in the area do that. But I appreciate
and someone must have placed that because it's on top of 3 other stones, right? Like,
right. Oh, this one right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
This one I didn't discover. This has like a sign next to it that the town put there. This is in North Salem, New York, and you can see me in the shadow standing next to it. It's massive compared to me right there.
And Mark is 7'2".
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm not 7'2". I'm close.
Mark is pretty tall.
You're pretty much a Nephilim.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
Mark is our resident Nephilim.
Interesting.
He speaks for the group.
So yeah, that's essentially maybe a reason why I'm interested in this stuff.
Now, real quick, Mark, you have on the screen basically 3 different images. One looks like an old time image, like somebody drew it. The bottom looks like a map, and then on the left is a blurry satellite picture, like NASA showing us Mars. What are these 3 pictures that you're showing us right now?
So you're getting 3 different scales. So the blurry NASA looking picture is the site on Google Earth, zoomed in all the way. And I'm basically showing you with that green line how the Hammonasset line intersects with this site. And then I expand to the Connecticut, which is the older map up top on the right-hand corner. And that is another rendering of the Hammonasset line going through the region. And then down in the bottom right-hand corner, you see the line going through the northeast and northern part of the United States. So it's basically just a scale to 3 different scales of the same line. And this is
were
just
those the copper mines that you showed us? Was that the
exactly
the weird stones?
At the Great Lakes sort of nexus point in the center here, there's a place called Saint Sue Marie or Sault Sainte Marie. That's one of the like spots on this line, and just to the west of that are where all those copper mines are. So yeah, basically what I'm showing you is remnants
right there.
of this ancient culture here in the United States.
Hey guys, let me tell you about our friends James McMahon and Copy My Crypto. Let me tell you about Copy My Crypto. Guys, listen, we've seen so many people making ridiculous money from crypto. But did you know you could do the same? The Copy My Crypto membership site shows you the coins that YouTuber James McMahon personally holds and allows you to copy them. It's like having a big brother who knows what he's doing. You don't need to know a thing about crypto or how to invest, as you simply do what he does. So let me tell you more about James. He runs Crypto with James YouTube channel, which despite heavy censorship has over 26,000 subscribers. Since March 2020, he's told his viewers to buy 26 crypto coins. Had you put $100 in each of those coins, it went up to be worth $123,000. Of the 26 coins, his top pick of the year, a coin called Phantom, went up 692 times from when he said. That one call alone retired a number of people, including guys in their 20s and 30s. Remember, this is public knowledge. You can go to YouTube and verify this yourself. So if you'd like to join the 2,800 members who copy James, then stop what you're doing and head right over to copymycrypto.com/TFH. That's copymycrypto.com/TFH. That's TFH. You'll not only find proof of everything I said, but my listeners get full access for just $1. Once again, that's copymycrypto.com/TFH. The recession is here, guys. You can suffer like everyone else or choose to thrive. James is the real deal. Go visit the site now.
Now, these stone structures on the side here, those are like stone chambers. Some of them are aligned to different constellations.
Have you gone in them?
Yeah, I've been inside one of them, and it was an interesting experience. There are some researchers who have brought voltmeters to these sites and found that there's electromagnetic anomalies in certain areas near the sites. So you have to wonder, what were the ancients or whoever built these doing with these sites, and the fact that they've remained, as a testament to this culture's, skill and ability to construct things. Now, this is just kind of the 101 on why I got interested in it. Now, just recently, I found this book that we're going to be learning a bit from. It's called Visions of Atlantis by Michael LaFlemme. It just came out this year, and planning on having him as a guest on this show. So maybe we could have him on to go deeper with you guys about certain things that we don't get to touch on today. But everybody's heard of Atlantis, especially if you've gone to school of any kind. They'll tell you about Plato, and they might even mention Atlantis and tell you it's some sort of fantasy fiction, and it was just this sort of platform for Plato to put some of his ideas out there. And what we're going to basically explore is how not only did Plato write about this place, but countless other reputable people from history have written about Atlantis, and they weren't sourcing Plato. They, in most of these cases, are existing before Plato. So, you have to ask yourself, why has academia had so much of a problem with this Atlantis Plato story. They've gone to such great lengths to dismiss this and say, no, Plato was just, it was just fiction. There's nothing there. And if you guys remember, the last time I was on the show, which I don't believe it, you would, that was a long time ago, but we kind of explored this idea that
Passive aggressive.
Yeah,
Go
that
on.
was so passive.
That was so passive.
I know you guys, I listen to every episode, but anyways, so if you remember that last episode, and listeners go back and
When was that? 1850. What year was that? What, was Xavier allowed
Yeah.
through the front entrance, or did he have to take a back entrance into the studio?
Yeah, well, we were talking about that time period. So yeah, and it was that episode that I talked about the university system and the corruption.
Oh yeah. That was
And how there's these secret societies that are at the foundation of the United States, and all of these, systems that we take for granted as authority actually have these very weird occult sort of behind the shadow operators, right? And I think Plato and the Atlantis story is an example of where academia gives you this sort of like right in your face kind of truth, right? They tell you about Atlantis, but then they tell you it's just a made up story. And from then on, people live their life dismissing this notion that there were advanced civilizations in the past. And I think this bias that academia has generated has done us as a humanity a great disservice, because I mean, there are countless artifacts across the United States that just go, undiscovered and uncared for, like these stone chambers. I mean, they just get covered with leaves every year. And, a couple people write books about them, and some people go on hikes and visit them. But it's not like the state has like a sign saying, oh, this is the official history of this place, like you would at like a Civil War battlefield or any other historical notable place, right? So
yeah, I mean, we see that a lot with anything that that allows us to maybe know that would change the way we see ourselves in this universe. They like to change timelines. Their whole thing is we're monkeys. We're just talking monkeys on a speck of shit flying through the air, all this crazy stuff. So it's interesting to me. It's very interesting on who, and I mean, we see it happening in real time right now with cultural Marxism, them just like taking down all these statues, lying to us about Civil War, lying to us about slavery, creating a narrative. All this stuff. It's like, yeah, this totally makes sense to me.
thank you. Yeah, and I mean, this is the world we live in. I mean, constantly, we're made to guess what's true and what's fake. And I wouldn't be surprised if some skeptical people see that we're talking about Atlantis and say, oh, this is going to be a bunch of hot chaff, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine.
Hot what?
Hot chaff. It's like separate the wheat from the chaff. Chaff is like a bunch of bullshit. But
thank you for not. Yeah, I thought. Oh, now you swore. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
oh, are we in the first?
No, we're not.
first
I was just
15 minutes.
joking.
Good.
I was just joking. Go on.
All right. So Plato didn't just make this story up, as I just kind of pointed out. He got this story from a established line of people, as you can see here on this little chart. Socrates, who he writes about, heard the story from Critias, who heard it from his grandfather, who heard it from a friend of Solon,
Heard it from a friend who
heard it from an Egyptian priest.
I love
Right.
that.
And
Heard
they
it from another.
talk
You've
about-
been messing around.
Yeah.
This is like, the original game of telephone in ancient times with Atlantis, right? And
What do these numbers represent, Mark?
so the first two names have dates over their names to tell you when they're alive, and then the other guys I just gave up because it was too hard to find Dropides. I couldn't find where Dropides what his thing was, so I just gave up. But anyways,
So number three, number three,
so-
number 3, 4,
That's
5,
great.
6.
By the
7.
way, Dropides is the best MC name ever, right?
It's so good, dude.
That's
It's
so
so
funny.
good.
Dropides, what's up? Eminem, Dropides, dropping a new hot lit joint real quick. That's the best. And like the more things change, the more they're exactly the same.
Exactly. And I dropped the ball at Dropides, but yeah, Sankis is this Egyptian
Sunkist.
priest, right? And he's talking to this Solon, who eventually passes the story all the way down to Plato of Atlantis, but he's telling him about Atlantis like at the end of Atlantis's basically civilization. So it's like telling someone about Rome and only describing the last 5 years of Rome, right? It's like, well, by that summary, you'd think Rome was a hunk of shit, but no, they were one of these huge conquering empires that obviously fill libraries with books about them. So we don't need to spend much time talking about Rome, but I think the same is true with Atlantis, where we only get this really small sliver of historical account from a time when Atlantis was really at its end. But many other cultures mention Atlantis. Egypt has the Turin's King list, which Matt LaCroix has talked about on this show. And they list 10 kings that ruled what they called Ulitian or Oritian. And they basically give the date 9,600 BC. Plato gives the date 9,850. So yeah, we got a bunch of dates that we're gonna talk about, maybe a few more, but keep those two in mind. So let me get back to where I was here. Scrolling too far ahead. Here it is. So then we have the Karna Parva, which is in the Mahabharata, which also describes this 10-year war at the end of which the island of Atala and all of its inhabitants sank into the Western Ocean. Okay, so now that's Egypt and India both talking about Atlantis, right? Now we have
What is this war? Do you know what the war was?
Well, it's exactly what we've talked about on the show, not with me, but with other guests, where these Nephilim, these Titans had these battles before the flood, right? I mean, it's this same story that we're getting from the Bible, just from a different perspective and maybe in fragments, right? So think about it in terms of that. And once we get to the Edgar Sayce readings, a lot of this stuff is going to start to make a lot more sense. I promise.
Well, it's like I've said 1,000 times on the show. Godzilla was a documentary. I've said it. I'll say it again.
Well, and
Godzilla was a documentary,
part, man, because these these Atlanteans were literally creating hybrid monsters, and we'll get to that. But yeah, it's Godzilla. It's actually Godzilla. So Solon, who gave the story to Plato, he had a whole poem about Atlantis that's been lost to time, and people guess that maybe what Plato heard was just a small portion of that. Then we have back to India, the Ramayana also mentions.
Oh, real quick, I hate to stop you, but how do they know he had a poem, and how do they know what part of that he listened to? I'm just wondering.
Well, we know Solon had a poem because it's written about. We don't have the poem itself. And we know that because Plato heard the story from Solon, we'd have to guess that maybe, this is researchers looking at the case and making the assumption that maybe Solon gave Plato a piece of this bigger poem. Or maybe what Plato had was all there was in the poem. I mean, there's no reason to take this all as fact, right? We need to have a level of suspicion here, because remember, this is all stuff that's comes from a long time ago. Who knows what the the ancients were really talking about. My angle is to come about this or approach this with a more open mind, because it seems like academia has this overly skeptical mindset when it comes to anything even remotely related to Atlantis. So essentially, we don't have to read every single point, but the point here is that we have more records of Atlantis beyond Plato. Okay, and it's not just from people in Greece, it's from people in India and Egypt, even on the island of Lesbos.
Where is the island of Lesbos? Can we do a tinfoil hat comedy night there?
You probably can.
Question. Best comedy crowd or worst comedy crowd ever? The island of Lesbos?
It's in that island is in Greece, by the way.
Of course it is.
It is in Greece, and I think you're going to get a lot of chicks shouting things and walking out.
It's beautiful though.
They all listen to Fortune Finster's new podcast that's like #1 in the world.
Yeah, that podcast is crushing it on that.
Yeah, they're crushing it. It's great, good for them. Fortune deserves everything that she's getting. She's the nicest human being on planet Earth. She is the most lovable person I've ever met. So good for her.
All right, glad we got that.
Shut up,
Sam is just he loves complimenting comedians.
We got that obligation.
He's so afraid
in there. Can't mention a comedian's name.
Well, it's like she's the one person that I just love her so much. I wouldn't want her to ever think I was fucking talking smack.
No, she's good people.
Nobody.
She's great.
People. Here's the thing, Sam. People aren't as paranoid as you are. You are easily misunderstand things other people say as insult. Other people, most of them aren't like that.
Most people, they listen to the show and they think you're crazy, Sam. Why do you care what they think in the first place?
Well, I know that, but I don't want. I listen. I always tell people this. I'm crazy. I'm not an asshole.
Right.
There's a big difference.
Right. Well, a lot of people thought Plato was crazy and an asshole. And, 360 BC Athens, that's when he gave this Atlantis account that's become so famous and such a hotly debated topic in academia. Like, you could seriously get kicked out of university for even mentioning this in certain time periods, right? So very controversial.
So the students were assholes back then too, right? They were blue-haired jerks. Don't you mention Atlantis? Oh my God, where's my safe space?
Yeah,
let me go. I gotta go to my safe space.
Yeah, well, and it was all men back then in school. So imagine how bad those haircuts were.
Rightly so, I would say. Yeah, go on.
Let's get back to that. Am I right, everybody? Repeal 19. That's the new name of the show. It should be called Repeal to 19.
Yeah. The good old days. All right. So Aristotle, Plutarch, other very notable people that academia loves. They love to, beat it to Aristotle. They love Aristotle so much, yet they won't even acknowledge the fact that he too mentions the sea being shallow, owing to the mud, but calm, for it lies in a hollow, which is just a fancy way of saying there was once a place here that sank into the ocean. And if you go today and look up the Sargasso Sea, you'll find out that the Atlantic Ocean has this weird anomaly where there's this spot in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean where there's an incredible amount of like plants growing. Sea kelp and other plants that grow really close to the surface of the water, so much so that ships can't even like make it through. And in ancient times, or not ancient times, but in the past 500 years, during the age of exploration, they couldn't navigate it. It was like mud, right? So maybe that's because there was some sort of cataclysm that made this island sink. We'll get to that in a little bit. But essentially we have all these people talking about Atlantis in ancient times. One of the most interesting accounts of Atlantis comes from the Vishnu Purana, which mentions a white island across a salty sea in the west, inhabited by sun-worshipping Magas, a Sanskrit word quite similar to the Latin magus. They were definitely not Trump supporters, but they were Magas, and they also called this place Atala. So again, we have this very similar thing going on with Atlantis, Atala, XG. You might know this, Aztec, Aslan. Like there's this same thing going on in Mexico. There's a ton of places in Mexico with that same name, Atala. And even in the Canary Islands, there's a town named La Atala. Yeah, a lot of Oz in that last word. But anyways, Constantine, Sam, you should know who this is, had a vision, right? We all know about how Christianity came to Rome and then Rome started Christianizing all these places. Well, this is sort of like the beginning of the end of people remembering about Atlantis, right? After this happens and Christianity starts to conquer Europe and the rest of the world, people, for the most part, forget about a lot of things, including Atlantis. And it's not until, the age of exploration that we hear people or see people starting to talk about these ideas again. But I should point out that in the Dark Ages, which, are called the Dark Ages for many reasons, scientists have found out that what people were saying back then was not myth. They used to think that the Dark Ages had all these myths about the sun being dim and the sky being dark, and scientists have found out that's actually true. There were these, sort of climatic events that made it so that the summers were very, very short for 2 years in 536 AD and I think 535 AD. So, given what is his name, Ian Ferguson talked about on Tinfoil Hat with like the Yuga cycles and all this stuff,
Yeah,
we can start to think like
he's great.
maybe Atlantis is this, golden age. We see its fall, and now we're in this Dark Ages, the Kali Yuga, and as we kind of go through all this craziness now in the modern world, we have this hope that, well, this is sort of the end of the bad times, because look how long ago these Dark Ages started. So that's kind of part of what I wanted to say.
2 guests ago, she's talking the Dark Ages also has to possibly do with something to do with,
What's
Jesus, right? And like he maybe lived longer than anybody thought, and those are the years that they got like some weird, crazy stuff with that too.
There's some really interesting theories about like Tartaria and how they, changed the dates, and the J is actually an I and all this stuff. And I that's over my head. I would love to find the right guest to talk about that on the show, but I have no response to that, Sam. But JT was a great guest, and a lot of what he said inspired me to talk about this, because for a moment last week I was like, nobody wants to hear about Atlantis. I'm going to talk about werewolf attacks, and I almost put this whole
not against that either
together about werewolf attacks. So maybe we'll do a one werewolf story at the end, but
I'm all about that.
But I wanted to kind of bring this up because Avery Warner kind of touched on this theme. JT touched on this theme, that there are these dark forces that people have been trying to make sense of. And I'm starting to think maybe we have evidence for them in Atlantis. So let's skip past the historical nerd dork stuff. Johnny, don't worry, for this episode, I'm the nerd dork of the show. So you're good.
No, there was never any doubt about that, Mark.
I know.
Thank you for saying.
I know. You're more like a sports nerd. I'm more like the kind of nerd that has books in his room. So yeah. Anyways,
okay. Well,
nerd. Johnny's a nerd.
I completely received your insult, and I reject it.
Oh, nerd fight.
Revenge of the Nerds. Revenge of the Nerds.
We'll get into some JFK nerd fight. Hey, real quick, I want to tell you about American Hero, our good friends at Blue Chew. Let me tell you about Blue Chew. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in a chewable tablets at a fraction of the cost, okay? You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or whenever an opportunity arises, because when she says it's go time, you better go and take no time, okay? You can take them anytime, anywhere. The process is simple. Sign up at bluechew.com, consult one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online, so there's no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew tablets are made in the USA, and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. Bang. Or with a marching band, fireworks, bald eagles who are rock hard flying around singing the praises that someone's about to go to Pound Town. Everyone's loving Pound Town. Yeah, let's go. So here's what we need you to do. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at bluechew.com. Chew it and do it. And we got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew for free when you use the promo code tinfoil at checkout. Just pay $5. That's bluechew.com, promo code tinfoil to receive your first month free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring this podcast. Blue Chew, enjoy. Go on. Let's go. Let's get into this. Then we'll have a nerd fight at the end.
So we're going to skip past some of the nerdier stuff. And
No. Who's that guy? I saw Jesuits. What is that?
No, we're not going to skip him. Don't worry. So we skipped past some Spanish guys that when they went to the New World, they're like, whoa, I think we're in Atlantis, right? And that's kind of interesting because Atlantis wasn't, again, really talked about for a long time at that point in history. But then we have this Jesuit scholar who is possibly one of the world's first Egyptologists, because back then people didn't really know much about Egypt nor care to study it. So he went out and he found some things in the Vatican library that made, a lot of sense to them, namely this Atlantis map. So this little map you see here, if you can imagine it kind of flipped over upside down, where America's on the right side of the map and Africa and Europe are on the left side of the map. It's kind of inverted in that way. But essentially what they're showing you here is that Atlantis was somewhere in front of America as it pertained to, travelers from Europe and Africa. You'd have to pass through Atlantis to get to America. And clearly we have evidence of them knowing about America before Columbus. I talked about that a bunch on the last time I was here, and how, this whole Columbus story is loaded with propaganda and myth. And maybe that's because they're trying to cover up this ancient civilization that it seems like maybe the Native Americans, maybe some of these South American cultures like the Olmecs and the Mayans and the Incas, that they are survivors of this Atlantean culture. But all that aside for now, Athenius Kircher has this map that he finds allegedly in the Vatican library. A lot of people don't give this map any credit at all. But it's interesting to note that Kircher was also interested in the inner earth or hollow earth theory at a time when nobody else was talking about that. And he wrote about giant skeletons found in caves in Europe. So,
yeah, dude, there's definitely some. I am convinced that all the dinosaurs that they say they find are really Nephilim.
That's the thing that we're going to get to in a bit with the whole Atlantean dinosaur fuckers, is like maybe our idea of dinosaurs is so skewed and twisted around and full of propaganda because they're trying to cover the fact that humans were...
Sorry. Are you saying that dinosaurs were actually really fuckable? Is that what you mean by that? Like they're...
So there are channelers who have channeled Atlantean past lives where they had interacted with dinosaurs of different species.
Well, no, I heard you say that, but your suggestion is that maybe dinosaurs were kind of hot. Is the idea?
No, these Atlanteans basically genetically engineered the dinosaurs to be hot. Okay?
Well, Johnny, you know what scientists do. The minute they make something, they try to figure out how to stick their dick in it, right?
Okay.
That's the.
I wasn't actually aware of that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Johnny, that's all they do. That's all they do. It's like, hey, I invented this. Hey, dude, I can stick my dick right here. And that's what they do. That's all they do, bro.
Sam's got a point. And yeah, that's what we hear from a lot of these accounts, is that people have experienced in past lives in Atlantis these very, sexual deviant activities where they were fornicating with all sorts of hybrids, and they had, seems like, the choice to, select like, maybe a Tyrannosaurus Rex or a Brontosaurus or whatever. Maybe
it's basically cosplay. They basically were like, how chicks dress up like.
And Michael Laflemme, the author, makes the point that like today you have these furries and these other kin people who think they're animals and they want to have sex with animals, which, borders in some disgusting illegal realms. But this is part of what people, unbeknownst to them, like, we'll get to this, but Edgar Sayce, when he would give readings, like, he would fall asleep give people readings, they would be like, yeah, I'm here for my bad back. And he's like, well, in a past life, you had sex with a diplodocus, and now your, fourth chakra is out of
Yeah.
whack. Your back hurts from that. And this guy, he's just a dude from 1930s Kentucky, and he's like, well, this guy said I fucking
Dude, the shit women put up with.
Edgar Casey is the most entertaining story. Like all the crazy shit with around that guy. It's so fascinating.
So let's get to Edgar Casey, because I want to talk about him. There's also another guy who channeled an equally interesting book that we're going to talk about as well. But essentially, this theory that I'm putting together, it's not my own. It's part of this book that I haven't read, but I've heard about. Reason I haven't read it is because it's like $200 online. So if anybody listening to this has a copy,
What?
get in touch with me.
The one
Why
right
is it
there.
so expensive?
Yes,
The Dark
this
Gods.
book, this book, for I don't know why, is so expensive. And basically what they talk about in this book is this exact theory that I'm laying out, is that these ancient beings have been on the planet. They manipulate humanity. They appear to us in all sorts of different forms, and they're behind a lot of the corrupt elements of humanity. And again, this Atlantean Edgar Casey reading kind of sheds light on some of this. But before we get to him, let's talk about Frederick Spencer Oliver. So he wrote a book called A Dweller on Two Planets. Now, what's interesting about this guy is he grew up in California in the 1800s. He was born in 1866, and he was out in the Wild West. And at some point in his teenage years, he just gets this compulsion to start writing. And you got to keep in mind, he didn't go to school at this point in time. He probably wasn't like very well read. But he just starts writing, and he writes this whole manuscript. And then he dies very shortly at the age of 33. He dies and never sees his book published. He just kind of shoved his papers in his desk. And after he died, his mother organized them and published them into this book. And what he talks about in this book is, I mean, it's incredible to think that somebody in the Wild West of California in the 1800s could write something that reads like a Star Wars adventure. Like it literally reads like a crazy sci-fi fiction. So let me just read what he says. And this is the only thing he says. And then the rest of the book is written by this entity that comes through and automatic writes through him. So he says, in these days of doubt, materialism, and even rank atheism, it requires all the courage I possess to assert in clear, unequivocal terms that the following book, A Dweller on Two Planets, is absolute revelation, that I do not believe myself its author, but that one of those mysterious persons, if my readers choose to so consider him, an adept of the arcane and occult in the universe, better understood from reading this book, is the author. Such is the fact the book was revealed to me, a boy and a boy too, whose parents were mistakenly lenient to such a degree that he was allowed to do as he chose in most things, not lacking in inclination to study, but very lacking in willpower, continuity, and energy. I gained little in educational triumphs and was pointedly criticized by my teacher as lackadaisical, even lazy. Hence, when a little past 17 years of age, Philos, the esoterist, took me actively in charge, designing me to make me his instrument to the world. That profound adept showed what seems to me a rare faith, for I was without any solid education, as generally so considered, was minus any special religious trend, and for my sole commendation had willingness, love, and remarkable and uncolored mind. So in this very flowery, poetic 1800s sort of style, he says, I didn't write the book. This entity came through to me, and it actually kind of ruined my life because he didn't do good in school. His parents were like, what are you doing? You know, you're not hanging out with other kids. You're sitting in your room writing all day. Like, what are you writing about? Right. And he didn't know what he was writing about. This was all channeled information. And, channeling runs the gamut of weird, right? There's totally like people who channel who I wouldn't trust. But what's interesting about this, and a lot of people don't point this out because I think the Christianity aspect turns certain people off that are attracted to this material for whatever reason. But throughout the book, he talks about Christ and he talks about Jesus and how this is like an enlightened channeling and it's in line with God's teaching. Like this isn't some kind of devil trick. And maybe the skeptical people would say, well, that's the first thing the devil's going to say is that, oh, I'm God, right? But it is interesting that it has this sort of Jesus-y message in a sort of, again, Star Wars kind of setting. So anyways, let's read a little bit about this guy.
That's so weird, bro. I would love to have channelers on here. Some weird ass channelers.
Yes, absolutely.
We could do it. So
channel some shit. And then I want XG to ask some questions in really bad English and see the channel go, well, what the fuck is he doing?
I think
she'd have to know. She'd have to know, and that better get channeled back to me in English, in Spanish.
I think
that'd be nice. Or Latin. What about Latin? Can they channel it in Latin?
That'd be so hilarious.
I think
that'd
there are
hilarious.
bilingual channelers out there that could fill that need for you, XG. So yeah, Philos is this entity that comes through Frederick. Okay, Frederick is this young guy out in the Wild West of California, and what he's writing is this story of Philos's former life, his past life in Atlantis. So according to Philos, this teacher that writes through Frederick, he was once named Zyme, numinous of Querdno Aru, whatever the hell that means. And he allegedly lived in the 112th century BC. So keep in mind, that's 112,000 years before Christ. Okay. A long, long time ago. And he says, as a young Poseidon prospector, Poseidon is like the area that they live in, Zyme strikes a motherlode of gold with his mining team and soon finds himself drawn to the capital city of Kai-Fu, Queen of the Wave, the mighty and awe-inspiring royal seat of the island's beneficent ruler, Rai Guao-Lin, and the home of some 2 million proud citizens. Here he attends the university, befriends the king, and applies to serve in government. He attains the rank of Astika, which is a prince, and is eventually sent in an airship/submersible called a Valix. He's a royal emissary who flies to Ganges, the capital of Cern, a foreign gloomy region near modern-day India, ruled by mystical adepts. En route in his swift aluminum airship, which is equally equipped for deep voyages, he receives his diplomatic orders from the capital via his Nime, or handheld mirror-like communication device in which holographic forms of friends and advisors appear. Keep in mind, he's writing this in 1880, okay? Smartphones weren't even like a gleam in someone's imagination back then. And he's describing what's essentially a smartphone. Rai Guaolin reminds him to represent with great care and tactfulness his Atlantean culture to their one-time mortal enemy, who now have reached such high occult prowess that even the Atlantean Valix fleet and its advanced weaponry stands no chance. So remember how before we were talking about how India records these wars with this ancient place? Here they're saying, yeah, you're going over to India and be careful. They're our enemies.
They're shady, bro.
Yeah. So we already kind of see the politics of 112,000 years ago.
Great. The Atlanteans and the Hindus are popping off.
Right. Well,
never ends.
Never ends, dude. Never ends.
So at some point, Zyme, which sounds a lot like Zavi, if you ask me, falls in love with two extraordinary Rhaenys princesses, the bold, cunning Lalix, his mistress from the region of Sald, and the alluring and philosophical Anzami, his Poseidian bride-to-be. Both women were refined, intelligent, and both were beautiful, though of types as widely variant as blush rose and white lily. He talks to both of them on his cell phone, forever worried one of them might catch him chatting with the other, and helps Lalix get an apartment far across town where he occasionally spends the night. So he's an Atlantean playboy.
Holy shit. When did this come out?
in the 1880s, bro. They're talking about,
Yeah, dude, he's like, he's on his
devices.
phone running game on both of them, hoping that one doesn't find his fucking phone. That's incredible.
Right. So this is kind of astounding stuff, considering, what's being talked about. And he goes on to talk about some of his adventures in greater detail, and how they fly over what is now present day Brazil, and they see the Amazon River, which at that point in time had all this agriculture going on. Well, sure enough, not too long ago in 2004, some scientists figured out that the Amazon River basin was at one point in time a massive agricultural operation unlike anything else in the world. So, here's one of many things that comes about in these revelations that ends up being true. And I have a list here of some of his revelations. So, Philos states that in his time, people of Atlantis flew around in these airships, right? We have those today. They did not have them in the 1800s, although there were sort of precursor sightings to UFOs. They called them, mysterious airships. So the idea was around back then, but in the 1880s, most people had never seen a plane with their own eyes, let alone a silver sleek airship, right? So the communication device we talked about. He also mentions the dry seabed, now known as Lake Bonneville, that stretches across present-day Salt Lake City, Utah, as well as parts of Nevada and Utah, or I think that's supposed to say Idaho. But yeah, again, scientists have found out that at one point in time, there was once a huge, body of water in that area that was not commonly known when this book was written. Philos describes the Nazca lines, which weren't discovered until 1920. He talks about these massive mining operations that were in the Great Lakes. We touched on that at the beginning of the show. He also states that in his time, the sun was known as Incal. Okay. Now, the Inca, they call themselves the people of the sun. That's what that word Inca means, right? So, if the Atlanteans called the sun Incal and the Inca called themselves the people of the sun, I mean, there's an obvious connection going on there, right? And again, Incas and their whole culture, not something that was commonly available for people in libraries in the 1880s. There's also mention of a ruined temple on the summit of the Grand Tetons, which is French for tites. And yeah, again, this is shown to be true. There's ruins of unknown origin at the summit of the Grand Tetons. So all of those things were predicted. And then he also predicts or describes technology in this Atlantean time that wasn't available for people in the 1880s. Things like the smartphone, holographic image projection, video surveillance, Ethernet, wireless energy, monorail, high-speed transportation, speech to text. Here's where it gets crazy, okay? Weather manipulation technology, which Jim Lee just dropped the hammer on all that nonsense and how the government's doing that. But he also describes things that reminded me of MK Ultra, where they would take these criminal Atlanteans and put them through this sort of like brain re-entertainment. That's exactly how they describe it, brain re-entertainment. And then, of course, electric rifles were how they kept, military order. They shot these lightning beams out of rifles and all sorts of other things. So
what's up with the book machine?
The book machine. So I mean, essentially like a Kindle, right? A book machine.
Okay.
A Kindle, and he described this again in the 1880s when
yeah, and it's fascinating because you might think, oh, these are weird things to point out, but these are all the things he saw that had a corollary in the time he existed. I'm sure he saw many other things that were just inexplicable to him, but at least these things,
right.
That's fascinating.
That is incredible. Wireless energy, damn.
Right. All of this stuff is described, and you know what's really wild about, and I didn't include a lot about this because it's way too complicated for me to even describe. But in this book, Philos talks about advanced physics, how the sun is actually this electromagnetic device, like more than just a hot ball of fire. Like, he's talking about some really advanced stuff. And again, the author is only 19, 18 years old and from a place where he probably didn't have a great deal of access to information like this. So you just have to wonder, like, what's really going on with these channelings. And, it gets crazier when you start to compare, because as you'll see, Casey and this guy, Oliver, who channeled Philos, they both talk about a similar sort of world back there in Atlantis times. But here's what I wanted to include, because it kind of describes the way the elites were treating the people back then in Atlantis. So this is what Philos says towards the end of the book. And it's kind of interesting because I don't want to ruin it too much, but there's way more than just what I'm about to say. But eventually, Zyme, who's a character we follow on this Atlantean adventure, he gets led into a desert, and then a sorcerer basically shows him how he killed both of his love interests, and then he's like, and now you're gonna die. And then the guy just dies, and then his soul is basically like stuck there, and he's wandering around as a ghost, and he's like, what do I do, what do I do? And probably hundreds and hundreds of years later becomes Philos, right? So it's very, very strange what they're describing in this world. So he says, looking along the lines of life's yesterday, the reason became apparent why all the wondrous attainments of Atlantis had ceased and left no sign, why Atla, which metaphorically held aloft the world in the light of science, had sunk beneath the waters and gone down into the deep, mysterious caverns to be hidden in an ignorance greater than that which shadowed Pompeii and Herculaneum from subsequent centuries. Natural decadence tells the story. As the centuries succeeding the time of the great Rai Gualin lapsed 10, 15, 20, and more, the nation came to a greater glory of mechanics, of science, and of physical condition than even Guanlin's time. One by one, the scholars found that those things which had always been possible only through mechanical contrivance were more easily accomplished by purely psychic means. They had learned it was possible to divest themselves of the flesh and in astral body go whither they would and appear instant as the electric current at any distance. They learned that they could perform material actions and thus had projected themselves. So they go on to basically say the Atlanteans reached a point in their advancement that they didn't need technology. They did everything psychically. And the author who wrote this book, Michael Laflemme, he basically says maybe that's why we have no evidence of any of this, because at some point in history, the Atlanteans stopped making all this stuff, and then they destroyed their own civilization. So anything that was left was just boom, gone, right? And they were, psychic and floating around back then, according to this guy. So, yeah,
You think they were in their own metaverse?
It honestly feels like they were trying to reverse what was inevitable. Like, we now in present times are thought of or described as being in the third dimensional density, right? And what a lot of mystics and spiritual people describe is like a densening over time. So we're at our maybe densest right now, and at some point we're going to hit that like point where we go in the opposite trajectory. Maybe that's already happened. Maybe that was the dark ages. Maybe that was when we were the densest, and now we're getting back to the more higher vibration. But I really think it's like a pendulum where it just kind of swings back and forth, and what we're seeing is just history going in these sort of cycles that it does, where kind of swings back like the pendulum to bad forces overtaking and then good forces overtaking, just kind of like balancing itself. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of depravity. I know we don't have that much more time because we're getting into the hour mark here, but there's tons of proofs of Atlantis. One of the first oceanographic expeditions to survey the ocean, they basically made the statement that there's no improbability in the story that the Egyptian priests told to Solon. So basically, in another word of saying, there's Atlantis is not improbable based on what we found at the bottom of the ocean. And they're talking about the mid-Atlantic ridge, which could be this piece of land that sunk into the ocean. So Edgar Casey, can't leave him out. We've mentioned him so much. Sam, you'll like this. Edgar Casey, he committed to reading the Bible once a year, every year of his life. He was a devout Christian and was completely surprised. Like, a lot of people hear about Edgar Casey and they think like, oh, who's this like scamster? He himself was completely surprised to find out that he had this ability to give people readings. He actually only found out about it accidentally because he came down with laryngitis. Somebody recommended that he speak with a hypnotist. The hypnotist put him under and said, hey, I'm not really good at this. You should ask this other guy. And then the other guy says to him, hey, you're actually way better at this than me. I hypnotized you and you started telling me what I was doing wrong. So you should consider like doing this full time. And, that just got in Edgar's head. And he'd always had these like psychic qualities. People talked about how when he was a kid, he could like fall asleep on a book and remember everything in the book. All sorts of other weird things. And he just wanted to help people. Like, he never charged anybody for reading. There were very wealthy people that sometimes got readings and they would give donations, of course, but over 15,000 readings. He never charged money. And, his main gig was medical diagnosis, right? People would come to him when they were ill and they didn't know why. And back in the 1920s and 30s, like, this was a necessity. You needed to know what was possibly wrong, because a lot of times the doctors wouldn't know and they would just give you, maybe their best guess, and that might not always work. So having somebody who could give you a accurate diagnosis was a really important thing back then. And he had a 90% accuracy rate, which, many doctors came in and tried to verify this. Even this like super like uptight German guy from Harvard came and interrogated him and was like, you show me how you do this. And Edgar Casey's like, hey man, I just need to fall asleep and like, calm down. And, he proved this guy wrong and the guy sent the guy packing. But
what killed him?
Well, it's interesting. He knew that he was going to die the day before he died. I don't know what killed him. I didn't really look at that because there's just so much about Edgar Casey that, for the purposes of what I wanted to talk about, more the Atlantis stuff, I didn't really get into all the weirdness with Casey's life, but that's another topic that I think we should have somebody come on the show to discuss, because there's a couple people that have written books about him that do interviews, and we can get
so real quick, what did he say about Atlantis?
Well, said a bunch of things about Atlantis. The most famous thing is that the Bimini roads, right? He basically predicted that they would find these structures off the coast of this island, and they did. And he even predicted the date that they would find it.
What?
Oh,
so that was one of the more, Atlantean centric predictions. But he talked, like I said, to people about what was wrong with them. So that was his main concern. And a lot of this Atlantis stuff was like kind of secondary. Like, you'd go to him for a past life reading because there was something wrong in your life. And he'd say, well, hey, in your past life, you did this thing and you're still making up for it in this current life.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, by the way, my psychic reading tells me you're lactose intolerant. Don't drink milk. And by the way, Atlantis was real. Anyways, free of charge. Have a great day.
well, one of the things that he said that's really astounding is that humans appeared on the earth 200,000 years ago. Okay. And now geneticists have proven in the genetic record that that's about when what we consider like the oldest human ancestor, that's when it appeared. And that lines up with a lot of these dates that are in this book, Visions of Atlantis. The Caroline Bays, which we just talked about, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, he predicted that they were that Atlantis was destroyed in 10,000 BC. That was like the final destruction, essentially, because there were 3 cataclysms that Atlantis faced. And again, these scientists proved that when they looked into the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. He predicted the stock market crash of 1929 in February 1925. And he also predicted the the Essenes, which you guys know about the Dead Sea Scrolls, they weren't found until 2 years after he died, yet he knew about things that were only learned about through the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there's tons more.
What
The
did he say? What
Atlantis,
did he learn?
well, the Essenes basically were this sect of Christianity that had different ideas that now we consider Gnostic, right? So at the time, before the Nag Hammadi texts were found, there were Gnostic ideas around. They were present in certain religious texts, but until we found the Nag Hammadi text, there wasn't like a main source for this information. Yet, based on what Edgar Sayce's talking about, you could say, well, hey, he knew about this stuff before we found the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's weird. What about them? I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, I didn't really prepare much on Gnosticism because I knew that was kind of a left field topic. But anyways, yeah, the Atlantis. I'm about to talk about something you really like, Sam. The next slide.
I love it all. I'm loving all this, buddy.
Next slide. But on the Atlantis point, to answer your question, he also predicted or revealed that at one time the Nile River flowed southwest down into the Atlantic, which it doesn't now. But satellite imagery now shows that it once did. So these are all things that couldn't have been known about in Edgar Casey's time, yet he revealed them in these diagnoses that he gave and these readings that he gave. But he was once asked about Christ and like to explain the historical backdrop of Jesus's incarnation in Palestine, because there's a lot of controversy even to this day about Jesus, right? So somebody was like, hey, Casey, tell us about what you know about Jesus. And he says, yes, we have the entity, referring to Jesus. The purpose for this, the desire to know the material history of the life of the master in the material world. Much might be given as to how or why and when there were the purposes that brought about the materialization of Jesus in the flesh. In giving then the history, there were those in the faith of the fathers to whom the promises were given that these would be fulfilled as from the beginning of man's record. Hence there was the continued preparation and dedication of those who might be the channel through which this chosen vessel might enter through choice into materiality. Thus in Carmel, where there were the priests of this faith, there were the maidens chosen that were dedicated to this purpose. Oh no, the Atlantean sex perverts.
What?
The Atlantean sex perverts got me. I was reading it.
Sex debauchery? Oh shit.
I clicked the wrong slide.
That's okay. Here we go.
Okay. Hopefully it doesn't move. Oh, okay. There were the priests of this faith. Okay. Among them was Mary, the beloved, the chosen one, and she, as had been foretold, was chosen as the channel. So he's essentially saying that Jesus was sort of channeled into Mary and, basically saying that there was a virgin birth. Okay.
Are you calling him a homunculus like Juan?
I have no comment on that. That's Juan's bag.
Easy, buddy. Easy.
That's Juan's bag. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting because a lot of people, again, they take all this stuff and they're like, oh, well, I don't know how this fits into my Christian worldview. When in fact, Casey was a Christian. He believed in the Bible and even said to people like, hey, when they asked him, how do you do all this stuff? He said, well, if you want to have spiritual powers, you should try reading the Bible and become more spiritual. Right. And, he gave a lot of, what's it called? The onus wasn't on him. It was on God, right? He wasn't like claiming that, oh yeah, I'm the source of all this information. He realized he was just tapping into this greater source of information. Now people call it the Akashic record. I don't know if that was the term they used back then. But Casey, again, talked a lot about these Atlantean past lives. And what's interesting is I didn't know this until yesterday, But Casey's first reincarnation reading is exactly 100 years ago from today. So look at that. That's kind of a weird little synchronicity. I was doing the research yesterday and I'm like, whoa, 10, 11, 1923. That's exactly, 100 years ago. So,
Whoa.
yeah, very weird that, and, I didn't know this. So I didn't plan this episode to be today because of this. It was just kind of a weird little synchronicity that popped up. And then in November 20th, 1923, he mentions Atlantis for the first time. And Sam, let me ask you this. Have you heard of the sons of Belial? Have you read about them at all in the Bible yet? Have you gotten to that part of the Bible?
No, I'm still in the part where Lot bangs his daughter and has kids. I'm at that part. I'm like, okay, what's going on here?
So I think eventually you'll get to a part where they talk about Belial. And I know you know about Baal. And it's funny because when Casey started channeling this stuff, he corrected the stenographer, the lady that wrote all this stuff down for him. He said, make sure you spell it Balial, like Baal L, like instead of Belial, Balial, right? So, and a lot of people talk about this entity Baal and having some sort of connection to sacrifice, right? And that's exactly what was going on in Atlantis, these sacrifices. So
these scumbags.
It says in one of Casey's readings, the competing Atlantean factions to varying degrees respectively sought discord and peace, with the sons of Belial particularly looking for discord, in the latter stages of the civilization, perpetually engaged in a struggle for the hearts and minds of their fellow men and women, often seeking to dominate both the citizenry and enslave the simple, still evolving things that populated Atlantis then. Notice how he refers to this as things, not people, not citizens, not humans, but things, okay? Who were bred and tampered with like livestock and used to perform menial tasks and manual labor, a theme they would continue later in Egypt. And this is something that they talk about when Atlantis fell. All of these hybrid beings went to Egypt. And what do you see when you look at Egyptian hieroglyphs? You see crazy humans with bird heads and dog heads and every sort of head, and even, bodies, centaurs and sphinxes. And so clearly there's a culture that talks about this, and even the Chaldeans, aka the Babylonians, they talk about this as well as these human hybrids and all these weird creatures. So Casey then says the early thought forms, as they incarnated in earth density, were able to co-opt the naturally evolving creatures which inhabited the earth before their descent into the material world, lending, he said from his many trance readings, support to the persistent myths of half man, half beasts, the ogre, the satyr, the bird people, yada yada, right? So, and we've heard about these beings on the show before, even like the dog man that Tony talks about being in Kentucky. Go figure that Egypt, right? The word Kentuck in Egypt meant land of the dog. So what are the odds that people see dog men in Kentucky and it has that connotation? So anyways, some more weird statements from Atlantis. As has been indicated in that particular experience, there were still those who were physically entangled in the animal kingdom, with appendages, with cloven hooves, with 4 legs, with portions of trees, with tails, with scales, with those various things that thought forms or evil had so indulged in as to separate the purpose of God's creation of man. And this is what the Bible talks about. The people had, fallen astray from God's plan, and he had to make things right. So, and I think this is genetic modification is what we're talking about here. And they even talk about these like plastic surgeries and these operative surgeries that these hybrids would go through to make themselves look more human. And eventually the Atlanteans were able to essentially breed out all of those hybrid qualities so that they were more human-like. And, some people today demonstrate qualities that are like, these people that are born with full faces of hair, right? These, wolf boys. And there are people who are born with tails. There's the tree man who lives in somewhere in Asia who has like bark growing out of his.
Yep.
These things are not totally far-fetched. There's, modern evidence of these sorts of things happening.
Well, I'm Armenian. We could be the werewolf people.
Well, and Armenia has a very weird ancient past too. I mean, Armenia is right there in the action. So yeah, I gotta find somebody to talk about the megaliths in Armenia. I think that would be
I'm down.
episode. But this we'll probably end on this. I don't know how much time we have left, so maybe we'll just read this sex perverts Atlantean past life reading, and let me know what you guys think. So Edgar Sayce himself once alluded, and again, this comes from Visions of Atlantis by Michael Leflemme. Great book. I just bought it last week. Edgar Sayce himself once alluded to this trend of Atlantean sexual deviance and tampering with the human form in an uncomfortable session given to a U.S. Army infantryman from Greenville, Michigan. Casey begins from trance. Here we have an unusual entity, for the entity is an Atlantean and will, in this experience, either make a marvelous success or a miserable failure with its life. Then he details his suggestions for the young man in this life before continuing. There's little, if anything, which has to do with human behavior about which the entity does not know a great deal. The relationship with sex has a special, definite urge on the body, and this may become the stumbling block. But rather, is it that the apparent egotism, the sarcasm, the know-it-all expression of the entity may be the greater curse to this entity? He then explains how in his past life, before that, we find the entity was in the Spanish land when there were those early periods of adventure and the settling in other lands, those lands from which the fruits of the earth of nature might be gathered. He was a man named Herman Hernandez who had many vices, one of those being the opposite sex. And he explored those often, it says here, something about slave girls in his next life in Persia. So this guy, he's got some problems. In his past life, he was doing some messed up stuff, a little conquistador rape, some concubine rape, not good stuff. I don't recommend it, but what are you going to do? It's your past life. You don't really get to choose.
Thank you for taking a stance on that, Mark.
Well, these past life crimes, we don't want any past life Me Too's.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, imagine him Me Too'd in your past life.
Exactly. All right. So let me backtrack to my
we got to wrap it up, Mark, because unfortunately Daddy has to go get his daughters. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm flying out in a few. I have to jam. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Let me just finish this one last thing. Okay, so before that, we find the entity was in the Atlantean land, where those periods of the law of the children of the one of the sons of Belial, the entity with the abilities to bring those things to pass from the application of the spiritual laws in its use for gratifying of material appetites, brought under its control many of those brought into the material experiences in the opposite sex, or was able to make them one form or another, shapely, unshapely, those with forms divine, those with such monstrosities. So they're basically describing that in Atlantis, they were doing like some sort of magical plastic surgery to create the ideal sex partner out of all these different hybrid options. So there's the juicy details at the end of the Atlantis.
Unbelievable.
There's tons more, and if you're interested, I'm going to be doing a full breakdown on my podcast, and we'll hopefully get Michael Leflemme on the show to talk more about this, and people can check out his book Visions of Atlantis to read it all, or A Dweller on Two Planets is the other book that I talked about, and then all of Edgar Casey's stuff is available through the foundation, the Edgar Casey Foundation. But yeah, very, very weird stuff. They were, apparently banging dinosaurs, hybrids, and then their huge crystal death ray accidentally blew up everything and killed all the dinosaurs. So that's their explanation for how the dinosaurs died. They were like, okay, we need to cause some kind of cataclysm to get rid of them. And they accidentally turned the thing up too high, and it basically destroyed way more than they had planned for. So yeah, that's Atlantis, according to
what a weird episode, bro. That's a weird episode. It was fun. The ramifications are interesting. The Atlantis like to just make shit and then stick dicks in it. Very weird. Very weird.
And again, don't take it from me. Don't take it from me. There are countless people who have channeled this information. It's out there if you go looking for it, and I'll make sure that you guys have the links to put in the description.
Please do. I want to. I mean, basically making. Basically, this was weird science. Atlantis was weird science, right? Just a bunch of dorks making big titty things to drop D's on.
Exactly. Well, and I have an idea, because this is tinfoil hat, and I know you guys are busy, so I'm not asking you guys to do anything, but just
thank you
with me for a second. Broken Sim, you have an awesome voicemail system, and I was thinking I'm going to set up a voicemail just for tinfoil hat that people can call in and leave their weird experiences. Maybe they've been abducted. Maybe they had
you might be teasing something here, Mark, that is in the works. I will tell you that.
Well, then it's
you
not
might be teasing something that
we weren't prepared to
happening.
announce for another 2 weeks. But yes,
and I'm not. It wasn't my idea.
Things are coming, buddy. Things are
thinking.
coming. Don't you worry about it.
Parallel thinking. I had no idea. Okay, never mind. I'll shut up now.
Things are coming, brother. Things are coming. Things are coming. All right, guys. Well, thank you, Mark. One more time. Tell them where they can find you.
My family thinks I'm crazy.com. This is the best place to go. You can listen to the show on YouTube, Rockfin, all the apps. And thank you so much, Sam. I love being here.
It was great, Mark. We loved it.
Johnny.
Guys, please go to SamTripoli.com for all my dates. I got dates. Again, I'm in New Jersey tonight. No, that was last week. Sorry about that. I am at Thousand Oaks coming up, Indianapolis, St. Louis with Eddie Bravo. Bellflower, very excited about that. New t-shirts up at SamTripoli.com. New t-shirts, go there. Rockfin, there might be some new stuff coming on with premium content. I will be letting you know. But again, everything you need, Sam Tripoli. Cash Daddies, if you're trying to make money in these crazy times, cashdaddies.com or patreon.com/cashdaddies is great there. Gold and silver, t-shirts, hydrogen brown gas, chemical-free body, Joel Stein, our favorite people over there, Harley Ray, Candles and Crystals, all that right there. And we're going to be starting to do some content on SamTripoli.com. So much stuff's going on. And please enjoy these highlights.
Here's a clip from the latest Broken Sim.
It would be a totally different conversation if I had Lucius Graves on the show right now. I would grill that motherfucker.
He's a weird looking guy too.
Dude, but the thing is, it's not even his real name. He's like the Larry the Cable Guy of Satan, right?
Oh, really?
It's like not his real name, and he's a DNC like fundraiser guy.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, look him up. Look up Lucian Graves. Look up
Lucian Greaves, right?
What else, dude? Who cares?
I mean, I gotta spell
It's his
it here.
fake name. I'm not insulting his ancestors or the guys I brought up at Skankfest by fucking their names all up.
Apologies to all of them. Yeah, here he is. It's Greaves, Greaves. If you want to look it up.
Yeah, but they cleaned it up because he was a DNC. Put in DNC.
Just
Yeah, I mean that guy just looks like he loves fat goth chicks, right?
Oh,
just
100%.
loves fat goth.
Douglas Messner,
Mesner,
also known as Lucian Greaves, is a social activist and spokesman and co-founder of the Satanic Temple.
Yeah, but he's also a DNC fundraiser, and they've conveniently left that out of his stuff.
He studied neuroscience with a specialty in false memory syndrome.
Oh, of course whoa! Wow, Johnny!
Interesting.
That's crazy!
Yeah.
Wow!
What's that about?
We know exactly what's that about.
We just had that podcast, last week, right?
Oh, by the way, okay. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but
that's What,
Yeah.
that news story? I have that news story.
Oh,
that we
the one that I put
Yeah,
up? Yeah.
yeah.
But it's like, Johnny, I cannot believe you just did that.
I know, crazy.
That's
huh?
insane, bro. The guy who founded the Satan cult got a degree in false memories. What are we talking about
It's
here?
wild, brother.
That is the craziest shit ever. Wow, Johnny, you just nailed that. My God. All right, Johnny, we got a lot to go. So that was my experience in Skankfest. It's the best. Skankfest, all the women who work so hard
Did
on
XG
them.
make it out? I know he was talking about.
No,
it.
he didn't. I just like if I'm there, I can get passes for people. If I'm not there, I can't.
Oh, he didn't. Okay, that's too bad.
But it was crazy, dude. More drugs than ever.
More drugs than ever. Huh?
Dude, everybody was on acid. You know, so we're leaving. Luis J. Gomez is like, hey, you want some ketamine to
Ketamine?
Ryan?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they go hard, bro. By the way, did you know that they were testing coke and one of the things had fentanyl in there?
Really?
Yeah. Thank God they got that right.
That's so scary. Okay, here's another fun with stupid. Couple is suing Disney World after claiming, get this, a water slide caused a painful wedgie.
Yeah, I saw that. Like, dude, this legal thing we got right now is nuts.
It's crazy. A couple is now suing Disney World, both of them are, after they say a water slide caused a painful wedgie and severe injury.
Hey guys, you guys know tinfoil hats for the people. We want people to live a better life and get stuff in positive vibrational stuff in their life. So we want to tell you about some of our affiliate programs real quick. We got Wise Wolf, Gold and Silver. If you're looking for precious metals, these are the best in the business, okay? I'm part of this Wise Wolf package program. I spend a certain amount of money every month and they send me precious metals and I love it. It's a great way to get ready for the financial collapse. We have AquaCure hydrogen brown gas. Listen, we've talked about before. If you want to look younger, it's a great way. Check it out. You click the banner. You use the promo code tinfoil hat. Our friends at Harley Ray candles and crystals. Go check it out. If you use Swarm 15, you'll get 15% off. They got candles. They have click on it real quick.
Sage.
They got crystals. They got everything you might need. And all you gotta do is use the promo. Look at that one right there. I want to get that aqua blue. I should just ask them to send it to us. Aqua blue at $55 promo code Swarm 15, you get 15% off that. Very excited to be working with Tim James over at Chemical Free Body. That's right. Get 5% off all of his products, everything he's doing with the promo code tinfoil hat. I love his vitamins and nutrients. I take them all the time. They are the best, and it helps me get my body going. And if you're looking to lose weight, let's say you're a busy dad, busy mom out there, go check out Joel Staley. He's helped me lose weight. He's got a whole program to lose weight, get in shape, all that stuff. Just click the banner and use the promo code tinfoil hat, 3 words, and you can get in shape. It worked for me. It can work for you. Hope you guys enjoy these, and check out the highlights.
And now, a highlight from Cash Daddies.
Dude, did you guys see this? Right now, it just came out.
What is
Banked on big oil.
The U.S. military has selected 2,000 U.S. troops to prepare for potential deployment to support Israel. It's just like...
Is that real?
Yeah. Unfucking believable.
Yeah, we got aircraft carriers over there right now with 5,000 troops.
Well, a lot of people are talking about a false flag possibly coming so they could blame Iran for it.
Yeah. The carrier deployment was apparently to discourage Hezbollah for getting involved. I think is what the idea was, which is if that happens, I mean, it's a nightmare if those guys come down.
Yeah.
But
here's the problem. Israel, we get told Israel is the world's greatest military. And what's really happening is they don't want their children to die for this war. They want other countries' children to die for this war. So when there's no international support, now they're freaking out. And that's what's going on right now.
Well,
so when people say it doesn't matter what everybody does, I do. As much as I hate where Twitter is right now, I think a lot of people are getting their news from it. A lot of people are getting news that they normally wouldn't get from the mainstream media, which is trying to bombard you. I mean, there's a reason why Ben Shapiro is absolutely losing his skull on the internet right now, saying dumb shit from a little fake little midget tough guy. And he's losing it. He's posting fake pictures and fake stories. He's losing it. He's losing it.
Also, I mean, nobody's supporting Gaza either. We should say, like, Egypt is not letting any of those people across the border.
Well, there's a reason for that. There's a couple reasons for that. And the biggest reason is this, Johnny, is the reason nobody wants to let the Palestinians in is because they know the minute the Palestinians leave, they're never going to get that land back, ever. They can't leave there.
Which is just I mean, think about that. Your whole family just being chess pieces on a
I mean, the
chessboard.
Palestinians believe that as well. They're like,
it's a nightmare. But they're trying to leave. They want to leave. They're trying to leave.
Yeah, this has gone on for thousands of years. Though I mean, this is not.
No, you're totally right, Howie. This is, and people are acting like this is just a hey. Last Saturday, this shit popped off.
No,
it's not.
When I was a kid, it was Beirut, you know, and then it was Iran.
The intifadas. I mean, we had 2 intifadas. Come on.
Yeah,
it's
intifada sounds like something you buy at a Mexican food truck. By the way,
but
they're delicious. They're delicious.
Intifada.
Oh yeah.
The most important thing here is what's this whole thing going to do with oil and energy prices? That's all we care about.
I mean, dear.
OIH in the past since October 4th, OIH was at 322. And we did on the show. We said you need to buy XLF. Or XLE and OIH. OIH is now at 345. Looks like it's headed back to 363. Because look, when you got global tensions, you got, especially in the Middle East, what happens? Oil and energy always goes up. Oil prices go up. It's been happening since the beginning of time. So what do you do to offset inflation? You buy oil and energy. You bank. You make fatties. That's what you do.
We go deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
Tinfoil hat, tinfoil hat, tinfoil hat.